You can finally see, can't you? Into the first smile I saw on John's face wasn't so much one of joy at my restored vision as it was one that seemed to mock me for regaining it. "Do you remember anything when you look at me?" John said, testing me. Even with that provocation, I couldn't recall ever having seen him, nor did anything come to mind. As I shook my head, John sighed and began to reveal the truth. "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? You married me. Like from now on, you'll be working as my wife." I was taken aback by his words, and in my panic, I dashed out of the hospital room. This isn't a joke. If I knew it was you, I would have never married. This marriage is void. You signed the marriage document yourself, didn't you? There's no way it can be voided. You'll pay for rejecting me 2 years ago," he said, a smug expression on his face, implying that my breaking up with him was a crime. I paled at his claims, having unwittingly fallen into his scheme. However, after learning the truth, I vowed to exact thorough revenge on him. My name is Catherine Miller. I turned 31 this year. The Retribution, I'd been in a relationship with a man I considered marrying, but I broke it off 2 years ago. The reason was that he explicitly said I was to be a caregiver for his parents. Moreover, he had numerous unreasonable demands like living with his parents, doing all the house chores, but also contributing financially. Even when I voiced that these conditions were too much, he brushed me off, saying, "Don't be so spoiled," and tried to push his agenda. Though I was serious about him, knowing his true nature, I couldn't stand it and initiated the breakup. When we parted, he tried all sorts of ways to persuade me, even resorting to saying that I wasted his time and that he had taken pity on me. I thought I was fortunate to have broken up with him before marriage. That was 2 years ago. After that, I changed jobs and relocated, but an accident left me severely injured, causing me to lose my sight. I cracked your skull for a while. I had to stay in the hospital, and I had to explain my situation to my workplace and take a leave of absence. It's terrifying. They haven't caught the perpetrator, have they? Yeah. It was late at night, and there were no clear witnesses. Returning home from work one evening, I was hit by a car that ran a red light, sustaining severe injuries. Luckily, though there were few pedestrians, someone managed to call an ambulance. To the poorly lit street, no one could remember the car. Living a life of inconvenience without my sight, I was assisted by my mother, Emma. Then one day, an unfamiliar man visited my hospital room. "This is Miss Miller's room, correct?" "Excuse me, but who might you be?" "Nice to meet you. My name is John Thompson." That this man, who introduced himself as Mike, seemed to have known me from work. Neither my mother nor I recognized his name, but he explained he had fallen for me at first sight at the workplace. I was deeply attracted to how efficiently and meticulously you worked. "Oh, I'm sorry. I must seem like a suspicious person. When I didn't see you at work, I asked around and learned about your hospitalization. I couldn't sit still and came to visit you." "Is that so? Thank you for taking the time to visit." Mike, appearing a bit embarrassed, left some gifts and went home. Both my mother and I were puzzled, but I was secretly pleased to know someone had noticed and appreciated my efforts at work. Completely unaware of the impending events. From that day, Mike diligently visited almost daily, offering unwavering support. John wants to cover your hospital bills. Such a good man, isn't he? What? Why would he do that? He wants you as his wife. He's not a kind person. Hearing such a story from my mother about John only added to my confusion. Yet, John didn't seem bothered and continued being kind to us. I became increasingly drawn to his kindness, and it didn't take long for me to become interested in him. I brought a popular cake today. Thank you. That's very thoughtful. Why don't you take a walk with Catherine today? John, I'm sorry, but I have work later. While John didn't hesitate to provide financial support, he seemed reluctant to involve himself much in my hospital life. Most of our conversations during his visits seemed to revolve more around his work and his personal achievements than my health. I believed John when he said, "When it comes to daily life, it's better for family to handle than a man like me." After all, he was taking time out of his busy schedule to visit, and they should be grateful to know more about him. I shouldn't think he's like my ex, always talking about himself. There were aspects that concerned me. However, being visually impaired and having John show genuine interest made me overlook these red flags. The weeks went by with him by my side during my hospitalization, and eventually the idea of marriage came to the forefront. John didn't hide his feelings for me and often alluded to marriage. I took it as a roundabout approach and found it endearing. In fact, a woman I proposed to previously turned me down harshly. But if I were to marry anyone, I've always thought it should be you, Catherine. Really? If you think I'm the one, then yes. Around that time, my eye surgery was scheduled. I mentioned filing the marriage certificate after the surgery, but John was adamant that we should do it sooner. Why the rush? We could fill it out after the surgery, couldn't we? I'll need to think about that. Trust me, you just do as I say. Perhaps I should have taken his haste as a sign of something being amiss. But by then, John's mother had visited my room, and we even had a meet and greet with our parents. His mother consistently praised me, saying I'd make a wonderful bride. Although we weren't married yet, the two of them seemed eager, always talking about our future life together. Given all their discussions, I assumed John was eagerly awaiting our union. Plus, with my mother's approval of John, I didn't see any reason to delay the marriage. So, without giving it much thought, I signed the marriage certificate. It's hard to write on a paper you can't see. Did I sign it correctly? It's fine, dear. You signed it perfectly. Thank you. I'll submit this then. Did that. Then quickly left the room. Was he busy with work or some other reason? That bothered me that even before marriage, we couldn't communicate well. But he was financially supporting me. Once I recover my sight, I thought, I'll thank him properly and then discuss our future. That's how optimistic I was. I'm so happy. It's like a dream marrying Catherine. You're exaggerating? I want to hold the wedding ceremony soon. My mom would be thrilled. Let's first focus on successfully completing the surgery. Owing to John's eagerness about the ceremony, I often responded with, "Let's wait until my eyesight returns." Actually, it was a tragic accident, but I believed that once I overcame this surgery, I would find happiness. I realized everything had been a deception when the day came to finally remove my eye bandages after the surgery. Eagerly anticipating the moment I would finally see John's face. I felt a nervous fluttering inside as the bandages were slowly unwound. When our eyes met, I saw John's face grinning with joy. "How is it, Catherine? Can you see your mother?" "Yes, it's a bit bright, but I can see clearly." "That's great. Finally, you can see." That's the first time I saw John smile. It felt more mocking than joyful about my restored sight. "Don't you remember anything when you look at me?" John inquired, as if testing me. But despite his words, I had no recognition or memory of John. Seeing my confusion and my head shake in denial, John let out a sigh and began telling the truth. "Catherine, actually, my name is Jack. Not John, but Jack. I'm the ex-boyfriend you brutally dumped 2 years ago." Upon hearing this, I felt my blood run cold. Even though 2 years had passed, I looked so different that I couldn't recognize him at first glance. Neither did my mother. I was left in shock, my face pale and eyes wide. "What's going on? Don't you get it? You've married me. From now on, you'll be working as my wife." It was from the police. Wondering what the police wanted at such a time, my mother and I exchanged puzzled glances before apprehensively answering, "Hello? Is this Ms. Miller? We wanted to discuss the accident you were involved in some time ago." And according to the police, they had found the car responsible for the accident that severely injured me. Shockingly, it was registered under Jack's name. As the officer relayed the information in a matter-of-fact tone, my mind went blank. "Okay, thank you for letting me know. What did they say?" My mother inquired. "The car that hit me, it belonged to Jack." "What?" As my mother and discussed the situation, a simmering anger began to rise within me. If he had been searching for me since I rejected him 2 years ago, it wouldn't be surprising if he had found me even before my hospitalization. Could he have caused the accident? Such a suspicion arose, and if it was true, how audacious of him to think such a thing. But could it be that he did all this out of spite for you rejecting him? My mother pondered. I've started to think the same. If that's the case, how selfish of him. I won't ever forgive him. But wasn't there a lack of evidence? My mother questioned. Running at her words, I had to agree. There were hardly any eyewitnesses to the accident. It's a fact that Jack's car caused the accident, but it can't be proven that he was the one driving. He might even come up with a lame excuse that someone stole his car. Considering Jack's character, he's capable of pulling off such a ridiculous act, I said. So, what are we gonna do? If there's no evidence, then we just have to make him confess. The chances are, if cornered, he would prioritize self-preservation. No more beating around the bush. We couldn't let him continue this charade. Feeling that he might slip up now, I decided to strike back with a recorder in hand, suggesting that we meet to discuss arrangements for our upcoming life together. Jack eagerly agreed, anticipating our conversation. Although I requested a one-on-one meeting at a diner, he smirked as he showed up with his mother. At people, I held back my disgust at his excessive reliance on his mother, clutching the hidden recorder as I gave him a stern look. He didn't come by car today. Why does it matter? Let's just get this over with. You need to understand the rules, okay? He still believed I was clueless, laughing maliciously as he spoke, really suppressing the urge to confront him right then. I played along, making it easy for him to say whatever he wanted. Which roles are those? You've said so much that I can't keep track. I got you. Given how forgetful you are, maybe I should write it all down for you. He laughed mockingly, eagerly beginning to list the unreasonable conditions. His mother just nodded in agreement. Even though I was recording, I had to endure his absurd, self-made rules, struggling to keep my composure. My mom here will teach you how to be a proper wife. So be grateful and listen up. As a wife, hun? Or don't even think of defying me. Remember, you owe me. Time and again, he would bring up how he supported me by covering my hospital bills. Curious to see how he'd react, I asked if repaying those expenses would allow for a divorce. As expected, he scoffed at the idea. Why would I agree to that? Let's bite my busy schedule. I came to visit you in the hospital. If you're so set on divorce, repay me for all the favors I've done for you. All the favors? You mean visiting me? You fell for me all on your own and decided to marry me, remember? Even my mom said she'd forgive you for rejecting me once. So, you better serve me wholeheartedly from now on. No matter what I asked, Ak maintained his arrogant demeanor, convinced I had no options. His mother, too, seemed to think I was helpless, boasting about retraining me. Keeping my temper in check, I waited for the right moment to strike. Just to clarify, can you break down how much I owe you? Sure. Let's start with the hospital bills. And don't forget the cost of the gifts I brought you, like cakes. While calculating the expenses, I tried to inflate the amount, adding things like taxi fares for his hospital visits and the cost of gifts. Wait, with such an amount, you'd probably take a lifetime to pay me back, huh? Making sure he was well into his own delusion, and after he mentioned that absurd amount, I smirked and shot back. Well, only if it's a legitimate cost. Of course, it's legit. I have every right to demand it from you. In that case, I'll also exercise my right. Maybe we can add some compensation on top of that. What? He initially seemed confused about what I was implying. I showed him the call logs, informing him that the police had contacted me about the accident. The police have identified the car that hit me. They've contacted you too, haven't they? What the hell are you talking about? Playing dumb won't help. The reason you didn't come in your fancy car is that you couldn't, right? It finally dawned on him that I was onto the truth. Visibly flustered, Jack glanced towards his mother for support. How do you know that? This with him practically confessing. I told him I had heard everything. Watching Jack panic, I felt assured of my upper hand. Prove it. There's no evidence that I hit you. Why are you so certain? I made sure of everything before targeting you. My mom here kept an eye out too. I'm certain. I confessed, indicating his mother was complicit. It's like glancing at the recorder discreetly under the table. I silently celebrated. Even if he was an ex-boyfriend, it was odd that someone at work would randomly spill about my hospitalization. He probably pretended to be a relative and gathered the information. His craftiness made me glare at him resentfully, thinking there's no evidence. That's just wishful thinking on your part. What are you talking about? What if I recorded our entire conversation just now? I flaunted the recorder in front of him. Both turned pale, realizing their confession was caught on tape. Not you. I'd advise against doing anything rash. A call to the police and it's game over for you. Just moments ago, the two of them were so certain they could manipulate me as if I were some kind of maid. Now they looked utterly defeated, their shoulders slumped in resignation. I had my doubts about how things would turn out, but thanks to their overconfidence and carelessness, they dug their own grave just as I had hoped. Seeing this, I finally felt relief. You intentionally caused an accident and had the nerve to make such demands. I'm sorry. Just don't report me to the police. So, you admit to everything? Yes, I do. I was angry you rejected me and thought I could bind you by owing me a favor. My mom said it was a good idea. Jack's overly attached behavior to his mother gave me the chills. But what felt even more unsettling was the silent presence of his mother-in-law sitting next to him. It's one thing for her to agree, but to learn that she actively encouraged her son to intentionally cause the accident is no laughing matter. The marriage is null and void. You signed the divorce papers properly. Fine. Since you caused the accident, it's only right for you to pay both the compensation and the medical bills. We'll discuss this further through lawyers later on. But why should I pay all of it? Half of the medical expenses should be on you. There's absolutely no reason for me to forgive someone who intentionally caused an accident. I coldly responded, and Jack, at a loss for words, fell silent. As I got up to leave, I could hear him arguing with his mother behind me, but I chose to ignore it and walked out of the diner. Hello, Mom? Yeah, I'm heading to the police station now. I tightly gripped the confession, ready to report the incident to the police. I'm determined to make sure Jack faces the consequences of his actions. Later, thanks to his own confession, things settled down much smoother than I anticipated. Jack, who always seemed to buckle under authority, Wouldn't argue much when lawyers were involved, and I managed to get almost all of the compensation I asked for. I promise I'll pay everything. Just please don't get the police involved. Sorry, but that's not happening. You need to face the consequences of your actions. It seems Jack wanted things to be settled without making a big fuss, but it's not up to me anymore. Just fearing the discovery of the accident he caused, he didn't even send his car for repairs, instead opting to hide the evidence. This dubious act led the police to investigate his home. He refused to cooperate with voluntary questioning, dragging the matter on, and consequently, the neighborhood quickly became rife with rumors. It's in the end blaming me for making things uncomfortable for him. I muttered some parting words and moved out. It's like the saying, the thief has a guilty conscience. Both my mother and I couldn't help but be in disbelief. I just hope wherever Jack has moved to, he doesn't bring any more pain to other women. Sometime later, with the compensation money I received, I decided to move again, knowing that my ex-boyfriend was aware of my workplace. I chose not to return and started afresh in a new location. Luckily, my new job environment is much more supportive, and I've been having a good time. Having a stain on my past does upset me, but I chose not to dwell on it, seeing it saddens my mother. Thank you for your help the other day. Cop 3. Would you like to grab a meal sometime as thanks? That sounds great. Any good restaurant recommendations? Certainly. There's a male colleague who's been quite friendly and doesn't concern himself with my past. Given the trust issues my past experience instilled in me, this time around, I intend to be more discerning and am hopeful to find happiness